Hi everyone, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. On this podcast, we take a film that on paper should have been good. Maybe it had a dynamite director, an awesome cast, the trailer just dazzled you, but when you saw it, whether at home or in the theater or you saw it through a streaming service, whatever the case may be, you were like, where did this go wrong? Myself and a special guest, we're going to be talking about these movies, where they went wrong, and how we can fix them. So sit back, relax, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. Yes, the high school experience. Cliques, study hall, parties, broken hearts, and secret government organizations. That is the gist of Barely Lethal, a film about an orphan girl raised by the Pentagon to be a super spy but fakes her own death so she can pretend to be a Canadian who transfers through a student exchange program into an American high school at an attempt at living a normal teenager life. It featured veteran actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Jessica Alba, along with promising newcomers like Hailee Steinfield and Sophie Turner. However, the movie was hampered with confusing tones, cheesy dialogue, and its conflicting genre blending. Joining me today is a former New Hampshire legislature, digital director, comedy nerd, and the writer of the Reopen America newsletter, Yvonne Bailey. She and I discuss Barely Lethal and how to fix it. As usual, spoiler alert. So, Yvonne, how do we fix this film?
How do we fix the film? That's a pretty big question. Well, I will say it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. When you told me that we were reviewing bad movies, I was prepared for the worst. And I have to tell you that it reminded me a little bit of like the Disney Channel movies from back in the day. Like it had like a Disney Channel movie vibe, except for like it was a little edgier, and the story was actually worse. But it had that kind of like corny high school kind of feel to it, which is kind of endearing. But the story just isn't there, you know? You start off with, like, it's hard to kind of tell when you start the movie where the direction is going, because you start and it's like, you know, this like super spy assassin kid camp. And then I'm like, okay, I'm into this. Like, I can hang with spy stuff, like kind of Kim Possible, Cadet Kelly feel. And then all of a sudden, it takes a turn, and it's just like, we're going full high school. And I was like, this is not only giving me PTSD from high school, this is just not where I thought this was going.
Yeah, and I thought there was this one kind of clever scene that I did chuckle at where, so Hailee Steinfield plays the main character, and she goes to the lunchroom and she sees like this gaggle of like blonde teenage girls, and one of them says, "Hey, you're the new girl. Why don't you come sit at our table?" And Hailee Steinfield looks at them and she goes, "You're cheerleaders." And they're like, "Yes." And she's like, "Well," she goes, "No, what you're going to do is you're going to befriend me and then embarrassing me to exert your social dominance. So no." And she walks away, and the head cheerleader goes, "I thought we were nice." And I did kind of laugh at that part. I thought that was a pretty well written scene. It kind of had that Tucker and Dale versus the forces of evil that I thought was as part of it. But that was, I will say, I did think that scene was pretty clever, and it does have some of those scenes that challenge. Because for those of you who haven't seen the movies, and I did a spoiler alert earlier in my intro, but just so you know, it's this girl. She like Hailee Steinfeld's character. She wants to be a part of the high school world, so she watches like a lot of high school dramas to get used to it. So she has all these stereotypical ideas about what high school is in her mind, and that's where a lot of the humor comes from. Did you see a scene that you thought, okay, this is actually a pretty funny scene?
Yeah, actually, I took notes. One of my favorite lines in the movie, and I can't remember where this part was, but she's like, Jessica Alba plays the villain, which is like this movie has all of these like superstars in it, like Samuel L. Jackson and Hailee Steinfeld and Jessica Alba. But
Sophie Turner from Game of Thrones.
Right. And it's just like these rock stars that managed to blow the whole thing. But at one point, I think it's during a fight scene, I can't remember what it is. I think maybe towards like the end of the movie. And Jessica Alba's there, and they're kind of like fighting, and Hailee Steinfeld is like, well, at least I'm not a psycho bitch to Jessica Alba. And Jessica Alba goes, give it some time. And I was like, that was my favorite line in the whole movie. I was like, this is perfect. We all get this year with age. At least I do.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. And one thing, like you said, it's got all these rock stars. Like Jessica Alba was coming up in popularity when I was a kid. So,
Yeah.
she was on what was the show? It wasn't Alias. It was Dark Angel. She was on
Yeah.
Dark Angel, and so I actually wasn't allowed to watch Dark Angel when I was a kid. But she was also in a few other movies and guest starred in a few things and whatnot. So I always thought that I was really sad when she retired acting, and so then to see her in this movie, I was kind of like, whoa, this is weird and all this.
Play that big of a role. Like she's supposed to be like the supervillain, and I'm like, okay, like Jessica Alba's cool. Like there's gonna be some good fight scenes, and then there's all this buildup, and it turns out that like the real villain-ish is Sophie Turner, who does a terrible job, and their fight scenes are atrocious, and just like really like I don't know, like as a I hate being like as a woman, but like as a woman, it's like it's like a stereotypical cat fight. It's like that is not how I would like if I was an actual assassin. That's not how I would go about it. Then there's after Jessica Alba comes in and there's that little fight scene in the house or whatever. The little brother, right, somehow he ends up with a grenade. He's like 6 and he decides to pull the grenade. I don't know if you remember this, but the explosion, it's like I've never seen a grenade explode, especially in a house. But he pulls the grenade and the explosion was like maybe as big as if like a blender blew up. Like that's how small this explosion was. And everyone is completely fine after it. I can't tell if like the parody is intentional or if it's just that bad.
and that's my kind of thing was it felt like they didn't really know what they wanted to do because like you said, it starts off like in this super spy thing. Yeah. And then it just does this 180 to this just a regular, like you said, Disney high school drama, but then it wants to reclaim the spy stuff toward the climax, and you're just like, and you kind of get whiplash because I felt like you didn't get time enough to get because in the movie, Hailee Steinfield's character, she pretends to be a foreign exchange student from Canada, and so she moves in with this family, and it's a single mom, and then a teenage daughter and her little boy, and also her little boy, and you don't really have a lot of time to get to know the family. And so you and especially the sister's character, they develop her so fast. You're just like, oh my gosh, because she goes to kind of being this mean person to the best friend, right? And you're like, how? And I'm like, I've never seen people go from being enemies to best friends that fast. I mean, that rarely happens.
Especially high school girls. And the other thing that was confusing to me, too, like in terms of like having a big hole in your story, it's like, okay, like Hailee Steinfeld is like, I'm going to be a foreign exchange student, which is like, okay, well, what was the plan after that? Like, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, were you just going to move in with them forever? Or like, also, like, what's the plan here? You don't have any money. You know, it just makes no sense. And
right, I get foreign exchange students are a year at the most, right? Like, they don't stay that long.
No.
Oh, that's so fun. Yeah, yes, that's exactly right. And in Samuel L. Jackson, he plays like the director of this secret Pentagon school that's raising assassins. I think it's called the Preston School, something like that, the Preston Academy. And yeah, I really felt like his character was completely wasted on this movie. Like, to be fair to him, he is the best actor in the whole movie. Like, it's like he took the role seriously. And then, and so he's like, and everyone else tried, but it's like he's too good of an actor to not pull it off. And so I'm watching his character, who like Jessica Alba, his role isn't that big. He's more there just to patch together the spy stuff with the high school stuff. But I felt like, especially the scene where he's on the bus, where he's the bus driver, I was like, the school bus driver, I'm like, why did they have him in this role? This makes no sense.
One of the parts about the movie that is so confusing is like they like create this universe, but the universe doesn't have rules.
Right.
Like, and they're not consistent within the rules, if that makes sense. It's like,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
you know, Samuel L. Jackson just keeps coming in and out, and she's like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think if they had established the rules of their universe a little bit earlier, it would have gone a lot smoother.
Right, and that's true. Every movie is, even ones that are part of a franchise, are their own self-contained thing to some degree. And so you have, like you said, they didn't have any of those rules. They just kind of went from bam, bam, bam. And I always chuckle at some of these movies because, especially even with the trailer, the movie is kind of setting this up to where it's not going to be it makes you feel like it's not going to be like High School Musical, right? But then the high school is exactly like High School Musical. Yes, I'm ashamed. I watched all three. Yes, that's yeah. We all went through that time. We all did.
Educational.
Yeah, but anyway, and I guess that's a good transition to where now in part two we talk about the director. Now, I have nothing against Kyle Newman. He directed it, and he actually directed one of my favorite movies, which is Fanboys, which is about a group of Star Wars fans who go off on a on this adventure, and they run into Trekker fans, and then they do something to the statue of Jim Kirk at his hometown. It's all this. It's like they get involved. They get into Las Vegas, and they meet William Shatner. They get into all these crazy adventures. So I was actually thinking whenever I first looked up this movie and I saw he directed it, I thought, oh, maybe this is a bad choice because Fanboys was actually a pretty funny movie. But then I was like, oh no, it did not work out. What do you think as far as? Do you think the movie could have been better with a different director, or do you think that, or you think it would have ended up exactly how it is?
I think it could have been better with a different director because one of the things for me that is the most confusing about the movie is this supposed to be a parody or is it supposed to be serious?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, have you seen The Hunt? It's another one of those kind of like, it's very serious, but it's very clear that it's a parody. And I think Barely Lethal, like, it has so many different elements that it could very likely be a parody, but it's not clear whether or not it is. So I think, I don't know, maybe a different director could have made that a bit more clear.
Yeah, and that's true because
disaster though.
Right. Yes. Yeah. For sure. And whenever and that's the same with because that's how I felt about. Which, by the way, I love the Coen brothers. They're some of my favorite directors. Hell Caesar's one of my favorite films. But they did a movie, The Ballad of Buster Scaggs, I think is what it's called, on Netflix. It's an anthology film, so it's 5 different little stories. And it was one of those movies where it was kind of the same thing. Is this a parody of the West, or is it just a Western comedy? And that's kind of how I felt. It's like they couldn't decide if it was satire or not. Yeah. And so a few people just wrote whenever I first posted the review when the movie came out, a few people were like, you just don't understand it. I'm like, well, if I don't understand it, then they didn't do a very good job of doing that. So yeah, I do get that. I felt like that. Now, obviously, this isn't a movie for Christopher Nolan, right? You want a comedy director like Judd Apatow or someone like that, James Franco or whatever. You want them involved. But I did think that was. I did think that they should have done more transition because just everything happens so fast. Like the pace in this movie is way off. Yeah. Like I said, it just goes from Hailee Steinfield's character and the sister. They're enemies at first. They're butting heads constantly because the sister's kind of jealous of the attention the mom is giving this foreign exchange student from Canada. But then they have like this moment where they go to a party, which wasn't even that wild of a party. And then it's like they bond over their misadventure. And I was kind of like, wow. It's like I've never, ever known two girls who are at odds to suddenly become friends, especially after that. Because different things happened to them, right? So they weren't even connected. So you're like, where's the sudden friendship coming from?
And it's just like the sister character was a little too stereotypical, like, especially at
Hmm.
the beginning, it was like all teenage angst. Like, I didn't even get
Right.
the sense like she was jealous of her a little bit, like maybe with the school and like getting attention as a foreign exchange student. But it was just, there wasn't a whole lot of context there. And it just
Hmm.
seemed like she was written as just an angsty teenage character, mad at the world, mad at mom, mad at school, mad at the foreign exchange student, and then it just changes quickly and it's like, what happened here?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And now to the cast, and this is one thing where sometimes whenever I do these and I talk about some of these, worse films than most people would want to watch,
Mhm.
is a lot of these films, including this one, have a good cast. Like
Yeah.
the cast is actually really good. You've got Samuel L. Jackson, you've got Jessica Alba, and then up and comers like Sophie Turner and Hailee Steinfeld. And I actually think Hailee Steinfeld had already been kind of established when this movie came out,
Yeah.
which was 2014, I think. 2015, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But so she had already been established a little bit. You had Dove Cameron, she's a pop star. She played the sister. So I feel like the cast was actually pretty decent. What do you think?
Oh, the cast was great. The cast was fantastic. It was a rock star cast. Like,
Right,
it's Samuel L. Jackson and Jessica Alba, Haley Steinfeld. You just said them all. It should have been a slam dunk.
right,
Or
100%.
at least I don't know if you have a rating system or whatever, but I would say the average Disney Channel movie is like a solid C, and
For
I
sure.
would kind of rank this as like a C minus D plus, right?
Right.
With the cast, it's like, Disney Channel movie. You're not working with rock stars here. You're
Right.
working with
Occasionally Bill Pullman would show up.
That's the difference.
Right. And also too, like, to me the difference between this movie and with like a Disney movie, say Cadet Kelly, is okay, it's going to be a little cheesy. It's Disney. It's got all these great actresses from the shows, but it's a TV movie. This was actually meant to go to theaters, and I think we were talking about before we started recording, it had a limited release, but it never actually got a wide release, and it became a TV movie. So I kind of think that so you're expecting this one to be like you said. I would agree with you. Disney Channel movies, solid C, except the modern ones are probably solid D minuses. But in the
Yeah.
good days of the '90s and the early
Yeah.
2000s, solid C's. I feel like this movie should have been a B at least
Right.
because of the nature of it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. When you have rock stars like that, or people who are perceived to be rock stars, you really don't have an excuse.
Right.
Um, and I think the other thing that was, if we're gonna keep comparing it to a Disney Channel movie, because it just fits really
It
well
had
with,
that vibe.
you know, Disney Channel movies do, yes, many of them, I'm talking more about the 90s ones, like you said,
Oh, right, for sure.
very cheesy, but they even have like a heartwarming, like, wow, that was a feel good story. Like, I
Right.
feel good. And, Barely Lethal was missing that.
Yeah.
I was not like, I feel very wholesome after this.
Right. And
It
what
just,
cracks me up is after the credits start rolling, there's a mid-credit scene with Sophie Turner's character because you find out like you said, you actually find out she's been the
oh,
bad guy, and it's like she's like getting information on Hailee Steinfeld. They thought there was going to be a sequel. I
terrible.
was like,
What did
what?
do you know what she said? I can't remember what she said. Something. Oh, I remember. And this was the biggest laugh in the movie because at this point, like, this is the end credits, and Sophie Turner, who's like the new villain, is like, find out where she goes to college, even in safety schools. And I'm like, okay.
Yep. I was like, they thought there was going to be a sequel, and I just die laughing because at first because I'm waiting for the movie to be over. This comes up because Netflix, the preview thing, their little preview box doesn't appear until like you're into the credits, right? So it doesn't appear. So the credits are rolling. Like, oh, there's going to be a mid-credit scene, I bet. And I thought it was going to be like high school graduation. Like you see her graduate and she's all happy, you know, Hailee Steinfield's character, I mean. And then it's Sophie Turner's character, like plotting her next step of revenge. And I'm like, what?
And
what? They thought there was going to be a second one.
And I think that's the other thing that's missing too, is like the villain really doesn't have like a good B story of like why they're villains and like what they're doing. And you know what I mean? Like, for some reason, I think X-Men, some of them are not good, some of them are very good, but they do like a solid. I'm thinking of X-Men because Sophie Turner was, you know, that's not
right.
But you know, they do like a solid job with like the B story of like villains and like why villains are villains, but also like they put like historical context in it, and there just wasn't anything like there was no other trajectory there. Right?
For sure. I agree. It was she became evil because she was always the number 2. And it's like, and I needed more. Like, does she have like a history of being a psychopath? Does she kill the bad guys on missions when she doesn't have to? Like, all these thoughts are going through my head because one thing
somebody paid her off to be an agent for the bad guys.
Right.
Or, you know,
there's nothing. And like even like Hailee Steinfield's character, one of the things is she doesn't kill, and they kind of have like this double entendre conversation with her and her sister where she's like, you've never killed anyone, and like she goes, well, I've never been able to just go all the way. Right. And I was kind of like, that scene, I have to admit, I literally was watching it like this, like physically my body did that with no voluntary movement. And I was so does Sophie Turner's character, does she kill? Is that what separates them? And maybe that's why Samuel L. Jackson's character is holding her back. Like you said, there's no B-story context.
Yeah. And it's easy to make one, right? Like,
yeah.
You know.
A couple lines of dialogue. They don't need 10 extra minutes of screen footage, just a few lines of dialogue.
Somebody paid her off. Double agent and everything like that would have worked. But
right. I would even be okay with the jealousy thing if they gave it more, like, does she have a history of being violent and stealing fellow agents' boyfriends, you know, or that kind of.
Right? She could just be crazy.
Now, one thing I did appreciate about the movie is that I complain about other films is like Jurassic World is a perfect example where Bryce Dallas Howard, phenomenal actress. This is not a statement about her acting skills, but when she runs from the T-Rex in high heels, and that's like the one scene where I'm going, why? Like when my wife wears heels, all she does is complain about the lack of movement ability. And so, and then this movie, Bryce Dallas Howard, she's running from a freaking T-Rex in high heels. But in this movie, like you said, there's that cat fight. I think it's at the homecoming dance, right? And the girls actually took off their heels and fought. And I was like, okay, I'm glad that they took notice of that. And like they were like using them like as ninja stars. That part was underwhelming, but I did think it was funny because the nerd character who has like a crush on Hailee Steinfield's character, Sophie Turner's character steals him because she knows that he likes her, and he has this aha moment when he goes, "Are they fighting over me?" And I thought that was, and then one of the like pretty girls, one of the mean girls, she says the same thing. Are they fighting over that nerd? And I thought that was kind of funny for all of us nerds out there. That was actually a pretty funny moment. But any last thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it definitely could be better. I think that's my motto.
Definitely could be better. All right, Yvonne, where can people find you?
Adjustments. Oh, go ahead.
I said, where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me mostly on Twitter at RealYDB.
And of course, you can find me on Twitter at RealJakeBerry, and it's the same for Instagram and Parler. I just like to make things simple. Also, check out my new website, which is StudioJakeMedia.com. I've got even more. I actually don't have a movie review. I think this is the first movie I've done on this podcast where I don't have a review for it on my website. So this is an exclusive, so definitely listen to this podcast. And if you want me to review it, I don't want to, but if you want me to, I will. Just leave me a comment below, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Once again, Yvonne, thank you so much for coming on. This was a fantastic conversation. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you right here next time on Studio Jake.